Today we're going to be talking about some of the new stuff that came with Jade Shadows. Just kind of like, I don't know, I guess an overview of all of the different stuff that changed and how that's going to impact your builds, the different mods they added, right? The Canonade mods and the Elementalist mods. We're going to talk about those. We'll talk about Blast, how it's changed, why it's so good, magnetic, cold, if gas is actually viable, toxin, all of that stuff, right? We're just going to cover all of that stuff, at least to a degree that you should get the level of information to understand it enough that you know how it works. So, where to start? Where to start? There's so much. I guess first we'll start with the Canonade mods. I don't actually have all of them. I think I have two of them. Here, where is it? I am really brain farting right now. Where would I find my mods at? Can I not view them in here? No, no, no. I guess I just have to go here. I should have shotgun cannonade and pistol cannonade. Yeah, I don't have the rifle one. But I can always just link them in chat to show you. Alright, where is it? Here we go. Semi-shotgun cannonade. All of the Canonade mods, as well as the Elementalist mods, drop from the new Ascension game mode. Now, the Canonade mods are only able to be applied to semi-automatic weapons. All of them set your fire rate to the base fire rate and it cannot be modified. So, like, let's say I go here and wait, there we go. Let's say I go here and I put on the Canonade mod. You can see it puts a lock on my fire rate to 1. Now that means it can't be changed at all, negative or positively. So if I were to put on accelerated blast, 60% fire rate, it does absolutely nothing. But if I put on critical deceleration, negative 20%, it also does nothing. So it can be useful, but it can also in general be bad if you want fire rate on your weapon. It just locks the fire rate in place. It gives more damage than whatever the base damage mod is for whatever weapon type you're using, while also giving a secondary effect. For shotguns, it's 240% damage and 1.5 punch through. That is a fair bit higher than prime point blank, right? That is what, 75%? Yeah, 75% higher damage while also giving 1.5 punch through. And if you're using a shotgun that you don't want fire rate on, but you want critical deceleration, then it's also making you not get negative fire rate. So it has a lot of potential, but it's only going to really be useful on certain weapons. In general, I think there's a lot of weapons that it's probably bad on because there's a lot of semi-auto weapons that you would like to have fire rate on. But it's also really cheap to level up. So if you're a new player and you can't afford to level up the like Serration or whatever because it's super expensive, well this, instead of being 20k endo, to max this out it's only going to be like 900 endo. So in getting these are incredibly easy. You get access to the Ascension mode pretty early on when you're doing the story quest and you unlock the Jade quest. So for new players, this is actually pretty huge. Now the punch through is okay. It's worthless on something like the Archiplasmor because the Archiplasmor has infinite body punch through. But if you're using a weapon that once punch through, it can be nice. I don't know, like maybe Kuvacom. No, Kuvacom's fully automatic. Never mind. What is a semi-auto shotgun? I guess Strun? You could use it on Strun because Strun is semi-automatic and it also is an explosive weapon on the Incarnon form, which means the explosions don't benefit from Galvanized Savvy. That means you can actually get more damage than if you were running Prime Point Blank here. So Canonade would be perfect here. Higher damage, and you get punch through. I don't know if punch through is actually going to do anything on the explosions, but the higher damage is nice. That's the main reason you would use it. Now, for pistols, they also have it, right? Every weapon type has it. Where is it? That's not it. That's the Elementalist. Where is Canonade? I'm 973% sure I have it. I just haven't leveled it. No? I swear on my life I had it. Where? Oh, where did it go? Is it here and I'm just blind? Well, that's unfortunate. I guess I'll just have to link it in chat then. That's fine. So it should just be called semi dash. You can't see, but I'm typing. It's on PlayStation, so it doesn't show the typing bar. Semi-pistol. Canonade. Wait. Cannon is 2 ends, right? Probably not. I'm probably just stupid. Oh, no, it is 2 ends. Okay, and then I can type in all of the ones at once. So now we do what should be a rifle cannonade, I'm guessing. I mean, shotguns is called... wait, yeah. Semi-rifle cannonade. And that's it. There is none for melees. Melees are obviously not semi-automatic. I mean, I guess they are. I don't know. They don't have a mod. That's the point. So, wait a second. I already linked them. That's why I have to look at them. Semi-pistol cannonade, just like, you know, the shotgun one and the rifle one will be this way as well. Again, only compatible in semi-automatic weapons and locks your fire rate. It gives 300% damage, which is higher than the normal version of Hornet Strike, which gives... Where is Hornet Strike? Here we go. 220%, I believe? Or is it 225%? Something like that. So it gives more damage than Hornet Strike would, while also giving you 1.5 punch through. So it's pretty decent. There are some weapons you could use it on, and then rifle is 240% damage and 1.5 punch through, just like the shotgun variants, which is higher than Serration. Where is a rifle? Serration is 165, Amalgam Serration is 155. Though compared to Amalgam Serration, you won't be able to get that extra sprint speed. So they're nice, they have some use, but they're not going to be like crazy on most weapons, because a lot of weapons you're going to want at fire rate, which means they're worthless. Now, a use that I would really like it on is, let's say, Nagantaka. So Nagantaka has guaranteed impact procs, which means internal bleeding can give you lots of slash, and it doubles the chance for slash if your fire rate is below 2.45. By putting on Prime Shred, or the base fire rate's at 2.5. It has to be below, not at or below 2.5 to get that extra impact. But the fire rate is pretty... Yowza. Oh, wait a second. Duh, it locks your fire rate, so it would be locked at 2.5. Never mind. What I was about to say is totally irrelevant. Lazar did a video talking about it, though, I think, and he mentioned that it could be good on Kuvachakr. So, in case you have, like, a Wisp that gives you way too much fire rate, but you're trying to use Kuvachakr with internal bleeding. So, it could be very nice on this weapon. That is it for the Canonade mods, though. So, next is the Elementalist mods. I'm pretty sure I have 3 of the 4 Elementalist mods, but we are going to go ahead and link them just to be case. Just to be safe, just in case. I tried to say both at once. Melee Elementalist, Pistol Elementalist as well. Pistol Elementalist. Then we need Shotgun Elementalist. Shotgun Elementalist. And lastly... Wait, damn it, I accidentally deleted a letter. Lastly will be Rifle Elementalist. Rifle. They all give, like, different secondary buffs. You'll see. Elementalist. Sorry, I'm taking forever to type. Voila. Now, Melee Elementalist. This gives 90% status damage and 60% heavy attack wind-up speed. It is multiplicative. All of these Elementalist mods give status damage, and that is a unique modifier. It is multiplicative with other multipliers, right? Like base damage and stuff. So this can actually be a huge damage increase for your weapons. And having another mod with heavy attack wind-up speed is nice for something like, where is it? Serrata. Because glaives, even though you get diminishing returns the more attack wind-up speed you have, it's still nice to have more so you can throw the glaive faster. So like I throw it, you can see it takes quite a long time to do. But if we come back here, most people are going to be running Killing Blow, 60% heavy attack wind-up speed, and Amalgam Orchid Shower, 60% heavy attack wind-up speed. Now, despite this already showing it brings it down to 0 on the heavy attack, ignore that. The stats are bugged for that. But you can see that it is decently fast now, significantly faster than it was before. But even though we get diminishing returns, we can still make it go faster by putting on the Elementalist mod. So, shabam, melee Elementalist. Now look. It's faster. It's a fair bit faster. So having this on my Serrata is really nice because now I get to throw it faster because I hate the long charge time glaives have. So, you know, all three of these together makes glaives feel so much better to use. Now, the thing about them, though, is they only increase status damage, which means the damage dealt by a status effect. So it will not, like, make your corrosive procs do more, because corrosive doesn't do damage. It just reduces armor. It's not going to increase the damage of your direct hits either. Only, like, the DOTs and stuff. So, like it says right here, slash, heat, electric, toxin, blast, and gas. So if you're using a weapon with a lot of upfront damage, this is actually bad because it's not going to increase where the majority of damage is coming from. But for weapons that deal most of their damage through a status effect, it's actually a very nice buff. Now there is something to note about this though. Despite all these mods being new and having the status damage multiplier, it is not a new multiplier to the game. There is a mod called Boreal's Contempt, I think. Boreal's Contempt. It gives status damage. And that has been in the game since the new war. I believe this is the right one. Yes, polearms. 90% melee damage and 60% damage from status effects. Even though it's worded a bit differently, this is the same multiplier. That means Boreal's Contempt is additive to melee Elementalist. And there is also another source of it, which is Emerald Archon Shards. So if I go to my Saren has 2 Toxin Archon Shards, right? Or Toxin status effect at damage increased Toxin Shards, or Emerald Shards. I'm so bad at talking right now. So that's 90% more damage. That is going to be additive to melee Elementalists, 90% more Toxin damage. And I can show that. So first off, you can see if I don't cast any of my abilities, nothing on my Saren is affecting my damage. Now I'll switch to Limbo, and you can see the same case here. So we go back to my Serrata. We have melee Elementalist on. We're going to take this off. We should not get any crits, right? And we can have this on. I mean, it's multiple. Actually, I guess we can take it off. It doesn't really matter. Melee Elementalist is all we have. Spawn in enemies. We want to pause them. Come over here. And now we hit them. 125 damage on the Toxin proc. So, if it was multiplicative, that 125 should be like, what, 211, something like that, if it's another 90%. But you'll see that is not going to be the case. So we come back over here again. You whack him. 90, what? Oh, I think it's because it wasn't as close when it detonated. There we go. No? What? 90, wait a sec, how? I didn't have corrosive projection on my Limbo, did I? How am I doing less damage now? What? I have absolutely nothing affecting my damage here. Wait, wait, let's try Necros. And we can just go to a build and have absolutely nothing on. I'm so confused why I started doing less damage with the Archon Shards. 63 on a DOT. There we go. Come back over here. So, if it was multiplicative, double check this. If it was a multiplicative damage buff, then we should be sitting at, what, 115? I think, 114, 115? Instead, now it's doing 93. So it's additive with the Emerald Archon Shards. So if you have anything in the game that you see as status damage increase, then it is likely additive to the Elementalist mods. That doesn't matter too much because it's such a rare multiplier in the game. It's not common at all. and most people are not going to be running any Emerald Archon shards for toxin damage, and this is only for toxin effects, right? Whereas Elementalist is for any sort of DOT or like status damage. But, it is what it is. Also, I know this should be pretty obvious, but this is not double dipping. For anybody that doesn't know how the double dipping works on faction mods, this does not like make you deal double or like 90% and then another 90% more damage for your stat specs. Faction mods are just work really funky. So now that you know how they work, I'll just show off the rest of them, or not show off, but like look at the rest. So Pistol Elementalist is status damage and reload speed. All of them have 90% status damage. They all have the same value for the status damage increase. The pistol one's actually really nice because it means you can build reload speed on your weapon if you want it without having to only have a reload speed mod, since the reload speed mod for pistols is not Exilus. So now you can have reload speed while still increasing your damage with one mod. Rifles get 0.6 punch through, which is nearly worthless. That is like not even enough to punch through humanoid enemies, I don't think. Like that is a very small amount of punch through. That's almost worthless. I don't even know why that's there. And then the status damage and shotguns get mag capacity in status damage. So that's pretty nice. The extra mag capacity is very welcome on a lot of shotguns. That is all of the Elementalist mods. Now, on to status effects. I'm going to switch to someone that looks sexier. There, Mag. Mag is very clean looking. Nothing affecting my damage. So, the main statuses that changed were... Wait, actually, before I talk about statuses, I need to talk about armor. Armor and health got changed. I don't know the exact values. I don't think they said the exact values, but health was scaled up to help balance out the fact that armor was set to a cap. Armor doesn't scale the same as it used to. It's a different formula for enemies now, which makes it so it's not nearly as high of armor on the low ends. Whereas before, enemy armor scaled the same as Warframe armor. So if an enemy had 300 armor, they would have 50% damage reduction, just like a Warframe would. That means if, let's say an enemy had 100,000 armor, which, yes, was possible, which is ridiculous. If an enemy had 100,000 armor, and you stripped 99% of their armor, they would still have 1,000 armor, giving them, I think, like 86% damage reduction. That's a yikes. That is a fat yikes. If you stripped 99.7% of their armor, they would still have like 50% damage reduction. And enemies could actually get like higher than 100k armor if you were doing a level cap and fighting like Thrax and shit. So it was a problem if you were doing anything above like level 1000 before. It was a really, really big problem. Well, now enemies with any amount of armor have to have a base of at least 200 armor, I believe, which gives like 20% damage reduction. And they now have a cap of 2700 armor, which gives 90% damage reduction. No enemy, or at least not to my knowledge, in the entire game will be able to get above that 2700 cap. So that means armor strip is not nearly as important as it was. It is still extremely valuable, right? Like, these guys have 2700 armor. So if I full strip them, I'm doing 10 times the damage because the 90% DR is gone. But beforehand, they used to have, like, way, way higher than that of armor. I don't remember the exact amount, but I know if you stripped them, like if you used corrosive and you stripped 80% of their armor with 10 corrosive procs, they would still have like 60 or higher percent damage reduction. I think actually a fair bit higher than that, like 70% damage reduction, which was rough. But now you can get by without any armor strip if you do enough damage, or partial armor strips. Because now that the scaling works differently, if I strip 90% of this guy's armor, and he has 90% damage reduction, I am then going to deal, or they are then going to have like 9% damage reduction. I don't remember the exact formula for how that is, but I tested it with Hildren. Here, let's go to Hildren. Hildren with 68%. Here, what's an amount of strength that would be perfect for testing this? I suppose we can take everything off of this build and put on Transient Fortitude. That puts us at 46%. Here, let's put that down. 43, which means now if I come over here and put on Augur Secrets, 49%, almost half of their armor. So that's close enough, right? So then we're going to want a weapon that doesn't like apply a stats effect that's going to make the enemy take more damage or anything. So what would be good for that? Preferably no status effect, honestly, would be extremely nice. I guess I can just grab Bratton. Where's Bratton? Breton. Yes. We will now use the Breton. Not using its Incarnate form, though, and no mods on the weapon. So, come back over here. If I shoot this enemy in the body, 6 damage, okay? 11 on a crit. No matter what status proc, it's always going to do 6 damage on the body and 11 damage on a crit. Now, if I strip him of 49% of his armor, now, let's round up. Say 50%. He lost 50% of his armor. So, if it scaled linearly, that would put him at 45% damage reduction. Before he had 90% damage reduction, which means we normally would be doing 60 damage, right? Yeah, 60 damage. Well, now 60 divided by 50, again, rounding, we should be doing like 30 damage? Let's see. I missed the damage number. 18. Okay, so yeah, it does not scale linearly. Kengineer did a video talking about the new armor scaling formula, but the gist of it is it doesn't scale nearly as hard on the low end as it did before. So if we strip again, he's now at 98% damage reduction, okay? Or sorry, I stripped 98% armor. He has 2% of his armor. And we are now doing, no crit please, 46 damage, which means he has, what, 20% damage reduction? Wait, that sounds off? Oh, it's because any enemy with armor in general is supposed to have 20%. I literally just said that earlier. I'm kind of stupid. Don't worry about that. Warframe, the wiki should have the armor scaling for how it works, right? So if you want the formula, either check the wiki or go watch Kengineer's video talking about it, because he actually has a really good video and he has the exact formula for how it scales compared to how it used to scale, or at least, right, for enemies. I don't know the exact value, like I said earlier, and how I just showed, you know, that I'm stupid. But the point is, armor strip actually valuable if you don't strip all of their armor. So a 50% armor strip is still going to be a massive damage increase over what it used to be, or at least on heavily armored targets. Now that we covered that, oh yeah, like I said when I first started explaining armor, they also increased enemy health to compensate. That means that if you're not armor stripping or you don't ignore armor, enemies are significantly easier to kill now. However, if you were full stripping or using slash, they are harder to kill. It has basically no relevance, to be totally honest, or at least not with full stripping, because previously when you full stripped an enemy, even at level cap, they died almost instantly. Like, full stripped enemies melted like butter. So it doesn't matter if they increase their health because they're still going to die pretty fast. And the main thing that it affects then would be slash, because slash ignored armor, so it doesn't matter, armor went down, but health went up, and slash deals direct damage to health. So slash was nerfed indirectly. They didn't change slash itself, but because of the health changes, slash is no longer as effective as it was. That being said, slash is still very good. It still does a lot of damage. Like, if I go... Wait, do I still have it? No, here. Where's Burst? Bursting's not the best example because it's a pretty broken weapon in general, but... Wait, I forgot I put Blast on this. Here we go. We'll go ahead and take this Arcane off as well. So if I'm using this, Hunter Munitions, you're going to be able to see that Blast... Or not Blast, sorry. Slash damage is still fully capable of killing stuff. Now, I don't have any stacks, and I'm not in the Incarnate form yet. So obviously our damage isn't going to be as high as it could be. But look at that. It does more than enough damage. That's heat and slash, granted, but, you know, I think you get the point, right? Like, slash is still very strong. So if your weapon worked with slash before, it more than likely is still going to work with slash now and literally anywhere in the game. Because slash did, honestly, too much damage before, so it's totally fine, still viable, still big PP damage. It's just now you can actually run other elements, and they're not horrible. So, on to status effect changes. Cold. Cold damage previously applied a slow to the enemy of 50% slow on the first stack, and is stacked all the way up to 9 stacks, capping out at a 95% slow, I think, right? Because it's 5% per stack after the first one. Well, now it goes all the way up to 10 stacks, and at 10 cold stacks, the enemy freezes solid. So we are going to put on Galaxion Vandal, take off all the mods, and now I can show it. Reset these enemies. The enemy will freeze solid for what I believe is 3 seconds. Wait, 4, he hits 10, bam. 1, 2, 3, he breaks. When they break free from the cold effect, or the freeze effect, they will be set back to 3 cold procs whenever they break, okay? You cannot refresh the freeze effect until they are unfrozen. So you can't just keep shooting and then never be unfrozen, but you can freeze them immediately as soon as the freeze ends, right? So like, watch, this guy's gonna break, and then, wow, it applied way too slowly, but you get the point, right? Now, on top of that, before, cold damage gave you bonus additive crit damage to crit damage mods, to anything that damages the enemy affected by it. And it went all the way up to, I think, 50% at 9 cold procs. Well, now, from 9 to 10 cold procs, that doubles. So a frozen enemy will take 100% more crit damage. Again, that is additive to mods such as Vital Sense. So, not multiplicative, but still a nice damage increase. It's pretty nice. Lets you freeze enemies. So if you were to use, say, like Tenet Galaxion, right? Or anything that's good at spreading cold, and you have like Shivering Contagion, you can freeze entire groups of enemies, giving yourself a lot of survivability just by everything being frozen. Like, look at that, they're all frozen. That's quite nice. And you can run status duration on your weapon if you wanted it to freeze them for longer. So if you were running the status duration mod on primaries, I don't even know if I have it actually. Or at least not leveled up. I don't think I do. Continuous Misery. At max, this gives 100% status duration, so the enemy would be frozen solid for 6 seconds. So, you know, that's nice. Cold, actually good, gives more damage, freezes enemies, so it's more valuable than it was before. And that means it's more worth it to run it, especially if you want to use Primary Frostbite, which is a great arcane. Next is Magnetic Damage. Magnetic Damage increased the damage. They made it do more damage to nullifiers than it did before, so if you have Magnetic, popping nullifier bubbles is a lot easier. They made it so it does even more damage to shields, I think. Wait, no, I might be wrong about that. I know it still stopped shields, and they also buffed shields on Corpus. But more importantly, it also does bonus damage to Overguard now. And that is the main thing you like. On top of that, when breaking an enemy's Overguard or breaking an enemy's shield, it does a AoE electric blast that applies electric status effects to the enemy. So let's go to, say, Cynoid Gammacord, which is perfect for this. Let's take this arcane off for now. We have electric. Although, hang on, that's kind of a problem. I just want magnetic. There we go. Except now I'm not going to do enough damage. I guess I can just set the enemies to, like, level 0. There we go. Level 1 enemies. And now we will spawn them in as Eximus. So when I break this guy's Overguard, it will apply, or do an electric AoE. At least it's supposed to. It's doing absolutely nothing right now. What? There it goes. I think it's probably just bugged in the simulacrum. I mean, you saw it worked on one of the enemies. I don't know. There it goes. It worked again. I know it's supposed to do that. It's supposed to do that AoE electric pulse every time you break an enemy shield or their overguard. I don't know why it's not working. It's probably because the simulacrum is always buggy as shit. But, you know, that's the thing. And like I said, it does bonus damage to overguard. So if I were to come back over here, let's say I put on a proper build for the Canonade Gamma Core, and then I spawn these enemies in at level 180. You'll be able to see that their overguard gets pulverized. Look at that. Very fast overguard shred. And look at that. Ah, see, now the AoE is working. Oh, wait, no, the AoE is there because of the electric on the weapon itself. Because I have electric magnetic. Still, though, just amazing damage to overguard. And that's will work on any weapon type. Now, if you were using a weapon that's a secondary, you could use it with the new secondary fortifier. That gives you overguard from dealing damage to overguard. And it also makes you deal more damage to overguard by 8 times at R5. That's a lot of damage. So now look at how fast these guys get their overguard shredded. Look at that. Almost instant. They just get pulverized. And now look at that. I have 15,000 overguard, which is the cap for secondary fortifier. Very, very easy to melt overguard now, which is nice because Eximus units are only immune to status effects while they have their overguard up. So you can just shred their overguard and then freeze them or like crowd control them with what your abilities or something. So very, very nice. Hang on a second. Before we keep talking, I need to get a drink. I'm dying here. Ah, much better. Okay. Moving on to blast damage. Where's the weapon with blast? Here we go. Okay. Blast has now been completely changed from what it was before. It makes an AoE explosion. Blast deals 30% of base damage after 1.5 seconds as an explosion. At 10 stacks, or on death, stacks deal their damage simultaneously to enemies within 5 meters while staggering them. So, let me go back to this Glaxian Vandal because it will be easier to show how Blast works on here. Let us put on Wildfire, as well as Rime rounds and Thermite rounds, just so we have a higher status chance, right? And we can just take Frostbite off for now. And we'll also put on Galvanized Chamber. Okay, much better. Now let us make these enemies not Eximus units, just for the sake of convenience. If I come over here, and I apply a Blast proc, and this will be the case with any weapon, 1 Blast proc. After 1.5 seconds, it will detonate in a, I believe, 1.5 meter explosion. And all of the procs will detonate separately, right? So look, 9 procs, they all detonate after their own timers. And they will each deal 30% of the base damage dealt of the shot that dealt damage to the enemy. So every individual shot will increase the damage, right? Now, that does not scale with elemental mods, to my knowledge. I said that was the case in the first video I released after Jade Shadows came out. Somebody said that wasn't true and they got kind of bitchy about it. And they were like, oh, it's obvious that's not how that works. But after seeing both the wiki says it does not scale with elemental damage, and Asian Invasions, like the biggest brain of all Warframe creators, said it does not scale with elemental damage, pretty sure it does not scale with elemental damage. So, your heat and cold elements, increasing them will not increase the damage of your blast procs. Everything else will still increase it, like status damage, base damage, critical hits, right? Getting crits and crit damage, any headshots, all of the normal stuff. It's just the only things that won't increase it are elemental increases. So if you have 10% heat, 10% cold, compared to 100 heat and 100 cold, either way, you are still going to be dealing the same amount of damage with your blast procs. So, that's very important information to have. It works similarly to gas. Gas is the same way. It doesn't increase when you increase the elemental damage of your toxin and your heat. Now, when you get to 10 blast procs, it automatically detonates all the blast procs I can't speak. The cumulative damage of all the blast procs is combined into one explosion that takes place in 5 meters on the target. So look at that, one big explosion, and it staggers any nearby enemies and deals damage to them. This 5-meter explosion has no damage drop-off. So if they are at the very edge of that 5 meters, or if they're hugging the enemy's balls where you make the explosion, either way they will take full damage from the blast explosion. So it is very good for AoE. Now, blast is only good on some weapons, not on every weapon. If you're using a weapon that cannot apply a lot of blast procs, it's honestly not going to do that much unless you are doing a huge chunk of damage and they're getting killed in one shot. Because if you kill an enemy, like let's say they have 5 blast procs and they die, it will then do the same effect as if they had 10 blast procs. It will take the damage of all 5 blast procs and make a 5-meter explosion, except it will happen when they die. So either they die, it'll combine all the blast procs to explode in 5 meters, or you hit 10 stacks. So either you have big PP damage on a single hit and it immediately kills them, then only one blast proc is fine because it will still make an explosion, or you apply a bunch of blast to be able to get to the 10 stacks. Otherwise, blast is going to be a pretty much worthless effect on your weapon. Yeah, will increase your damage technically, but it's not by enough to matter, especially when you can run like heat or something else to get big DOTs. So what kind of weapons does that mean would be good with it? Well, again, anything that applies lots of status or anything that does enough damage to one shot. So a good example would be what's something that can one shot the enemy? I want to say Heck, but Heck does not work well with Blast. I tried it, it's kind of mediocre. I don't know about one-shotting enemies, I guess maybe with a bow, but other than that, beam weapons work extremely nice because how good they are at applying status, because of how status chance and multi-shot work on a beam, specifically multi-shot. It like multiplies the status onto the hits. So that's why they're so good at applying status effects. So beam weapons are extremely strong. On top of that, any AoE weapon that is good for applying status will do insanely well, such as Tenet Glaxion. And the reason for that is because it can apply blast to multiple enemies. So if there's a group of enemies, if I'm using a weapon that does not have AoE, and I just build 10 blast procs on this enemy, he's going to have one explosion to hit all the enemies in 5 meters. But if I am hitting this enemy, and it chains to this enemy, and this enemy, and this enemy, and they also all get 5 or 10 blast procs, that means there is then 4 explosions, one from each enemy, and each explosion is hitting all of the enemies. So AoE weapons that are good at applying status effects are going to be incredible for blast. That's why Tenet Glaxion is one of the best weapons to have blast on. Because Tenet Glaxion is just insane with all of its beam chaining. And you can also get more beam chaining and hit more enemies in general if you put punch through on it. Pretty crazy. So that is the gist of how blast works. I also have a video explaining how it works in unison with Toxic Lash, because it does work uniquely with Toxic Lash. So if you go to my channel or you search on YouTube, Saren is a blast, that should be the name of the video. It should come up. It's only like 10 minutes long, I think, and it explains why Toxic Lash is so insane with blast damage. Because, you know, Saren definitely needed a buff. Now, that is the only 3 statuses they directly changed the effects of, to my knowledge. I don't think they affected anything else. But there is another thing to go over with damage. That is faction type multipliers. And I do not mean faction mods, because those are a separate damage multiplier. Faction multipliers are new / old / a changed version of something we had. Prior to Jade Shadows, there was skin type multipliers to flesh, right, like health and shields and armor and pretty much anything in the game. So, like, if you were using magnetic, it could do extra damage to normal shields, but then it wouldn't do as much extra damage to proto shields, or corrosive could do extra damage to ferrite armor, but it would do less extra damage to alloy armor. or like different kinds of flesh, like HP on a robotic enemy would be separate from HP on a corpus enemy, which would be separate from HP on a Grineer enemy because they would have cloned flesh, which would be separate from HP on an infested enemy, right? It was unbelievably complicated and made no sense at all. Also, there were different amounts of damage. It would be like plus 25, plus 50, or plus 75, or negative 25, negative 50, negative 75. And then in a couple cases, I believe there were also like plus 15 or negative 15. It was extremely convoluted and it made no sense. They did away with all of that. Now, instead, you deal more damage based off of the enemy's faction, which is very good, especially for something like corrosive damage, let's say. Before Jade Shadows, corrosive damage did plus 75% damage to ferrite armor. So if the enemy had ferrite armor, which is most of the armored enemies, some enemies have alloy armor, but that's a different kind of armor. That would be like what a bombard would have. But a corrupted heavy gunner has ferrite armor. So corrosive would do 75% more damage to that enemy. However, after you stripped all of their armor, like let's say you had 3 green Archon shards on for more corrosive stacks and you fully stripped their armor, they would then no longer have armor. So you're not doing that 75% bonus damage. That's gone because now you're hitting cloned flesh. So it would actually, unless you're doing like level cap where like you need a full strip, and anything under like level 1000, full stripping enemy would actually be worse than stripping 99% of their armor because you would lose the 75% multiplicative damage buff because all of these damage buffs are multiplicative to everything else in the game. They are their own unique damage source, and they are multiplicative with faction mods, to my knowledge. I'm like 99% certain of that. So that is gone. Now instead, different elements deal increased or decreased damage to factions and sub-factions. So, for example, Blast deals 1.5 more damage, so 50% more damage to infested enemies on Deimos. And it deals 0.5 damage, so 50% less damage to Amalgam Corpus enemies. All of the multipliers are either 1.5 more or 0.5, so it's less, right? So you either deal 50% more damage or 50% less, and if it doesn't state in the damage efficacy of faction type, that means you deal the normal 1.0 multiplier. Some elements don't even have a negative, right? Like Electric has 2 positives, 1.5 to Corpus Amalgam and 1.5 to Murmur. So that's nice. And there's different ones. Some will only have like 1 positive, or some have like 2 negatives and a positive. Gas damage, for example, if I switch to, here we are, gas damage has only 1 positive, which is 1.5 to infested Deimos. That's actually really nice because gas did negative damage to armor before. So gas actually got buffed. It was not buffed directly, but it also was sort of because they changed how the damage efficacy thing works, right, to different factions. Now, the different factions would be, I think, Grineer, Corpus, Kuva Grineer. Kuva Grineer are separate from normal Grineer. Infested, Deimos Infested, Murmur, Amalgam Corpus. They are a separate thing, right? The sentient versions of the Corpus that are on Saturn? No, Saturn's not the right planet. Jupiter? I don't know. The planet, I think it's Jupiter, actually. Pretty sure it's Jupiter. But they're their own faction. Narmer, which are only in the new war missions. They are also their own factions. One of the things, elements, does bonus damage to them. And Sentience. Oh yeah, and Orican. The Orican are labeled as Orican instead of Corrupted now, which is weird, but if you see anything that says Orican or Corrupted, they're the same thing. Hopefully they'll fix that to all be the same name for everything in the future, but that's not the case right now. But I'm pretty sure that's all of the different factions. So if you want to get extra damage on a certain faction, check out the elemental types, right? Look at the damage, look at what it does bonus damage to. It's nice to have, but also not like the be-all, end-all. So you can ignore it and you'll be fine, but you will benefit from paying attention to it. So that's really, really nice. The combination of the faction damage faction damage multiplier instead of the skin type multiplier change, the armor and health changes, and then the status effect changes to magnetic, cold, and blast have made it so the game is so so much more balanced now. It's still way too easy. I think they need to make enemies harder to kill because we do too much damage. But most elements have value now, right? So impact is still worthless for the most part. Impact is terrible. Puncture is decent though, because it can make the enemy deal less damage and you get flat crit against the enemy. Slash is amazing because the bleed effect goes through armor. Then for the base elemental types, cold slows the enemy, it can freeze the enemy, and makes you deal more crit damage. Toxin has a toxin DOT, which is nice, and it can bypass shields. Electric has an electric AoE that is a yes, yeah, it has a AoE DOT that has very nice damage. Heat has a refreshing cumulative DOT that burns through armor and does really good damage. Then for the other 6 damage types, radiation is decent because it gives some level of crowd control. Viral, still insane because you do more damage to flesh. Gas is much better now. It still has value. The main problem with gas, though, is that it's filling a similar role to blast, so I think they need to change gas in some way. Gas and impact are, honestly, in my opinion, the only 2 stats effects that really need changed now. So, but gas is not bad by any means. Gas is still very good. It's better than it was before. It's still a good status effect. It's just blast is better. Blast, which is amazing. It has great AoE damage. It doesn't work on every weapon, but the weapons it does work on, it can be extremely good for AoE. Magnetic shreds shields. Toxin would be better because it goes through shields, but magnetic does bonus damage to Overguard now, while also doing an electric AoE application after breaking Overguard or shields. So it's also really nice. And then lastly, corrosive. Corrosive is actually valuable now because you don't have to full strip an enemy. Before, if you didn't have the Emerald Archon shards to apply max corrosive stacks, stripping the enemy's armor anywhere above level 1000 with 10 corrosive stacks still didn't let you do enough damage to kill most of the time. But now that the armor changes are a thing, having the 80% strip from corrosive is actually extremely valuable. Almost every status is useful now, and you don't have to have armor strip. Like, I can't even properly put into words how big of a change to Warframe this was. Jade Shadows. It just completely changed damage on a base level. And now you can use almost any status type and it will be useful in at least some area of the game, which is very nice for having different diversity in builds, right? Like variety, that's the word. There's actually variety in build options now, which is so very nice. Like I said though, impact and gas could use some slight tweaking, mostly impact, because impact sucks, but gas just needs a slight change since it's filling a similar role to blast, but blast does it better. That is all of the main stuff I wanted to cover in this video. This video is probably like an hour long. We went over the skin type to faction type changes, the status changes, and the new Elementalist and Canonade mods. Hopefully you gained some level of information that was useful in this video. I hope at least one person did. If even one person did, then hey, at least it wasn't a worthless waste of my time. If you liked the video, leave a like and subscribe maybe. That would be awesome. Trying to get 2,000 subs. Adios.